Hello, everyone. So, welcome to the podcast Healer, Heal Yourself, Reduce Burnout, Discover Your Creativity While You Heal Others. I have as my guest today, I'm the host. I always forget to introduce myself. I'm the host, Dr. Isla Bates, and today I have with me Jacob Nordby, and he's a writer and author, and he's written the book, The Creative Cure: How Finding and Freeing Your Inner Artist Can Heal Your Life. So welcome to the podcast, Jacob. It's great to see you again.
I'm so glad to be back. When my assistant said that you agreed to have me on, I was just so happy about that. I love what your work and I love your spirit. So thanks for having me back.
Well, thank you so much. That's a big compliment coming from you. I know we're of like minds when it comes to creativity. It's just an important piece of our lives, and I think we're both trying to get other people to realize that too, right? That it comes from the soul. It's within all
Yes.
of us. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
So, I know that when we first talked, it was, I think, right after the pandemic. It may have been 2021, if
Yeah.
not 2020. And at that time, you had just finished this book, which has a foreword by Julia Cameron, who we both love. And and I remember you had three questions that you like people to ask themselves. Do
Yeah.
you want to elaborate on that for us?
Oh yeah, the creative self-journaling tool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, the first question, if and a lot of people who don't think of themselves as journalers or writers, a lot of times people say, "Oh, I'm not good at that." And I'll ask, well, are you willing to ask yourself three questions? 'Cause I don't care whether you want to journal or not, but I'd love to help you check in with yourself and tap into that wisdom that's in there always. And so the first question, Hesla, is how do I feel right now? And it's so interesting. Most of us are we get the message, we internalize the message at a very early age that how we feel doesn't matter. And we're living in a society right now where some of those messages are overt, F your feelings, or feelings always lie, and all of that. And so the very act of asking ourselves, how do I feel right now, can be so grounding and centering. We come out from being disassociated and, sort of off in the ethers and actually come back into our bodies and say, oh, how do I feel right now? And that can send this important message to our inner self that says, I matter, So that's question number one.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, I find that a lot of people aren't in touch with their bodies, very
Mhm.
disconnected. A lot of us are in our heads. We're
Yeah.
thinking a lot, and we're not feeling, we don't, we're not thinking, okay, well, how do I feel right now?
Mm.
We're thinking about maybe a word to describe it, but we're not thinking about how our bodies feel.
Truly. Oh, I love what you just said. We're thinking about a word to describe it, but we're not actually in the
Mm.
somatic. We're not in the experience itself.
Right.
Wow, I love that. Well, and that's one of the reasons that why asking that question for me has been so useful. And as an intervention sometimes, Dr. Bates, when I ask that question, sometimes it's an intervention with myself to go, hang on a minute. You're
Yeah.
spinning out. How do you feel right now? And telling the truth about that can then lead me to the next question, which is, what do I need right now?
Right.
Um, Often how do I feel can come back with something quite simple. I feel tired. I feel anxious. I feel hungry. Sometimes we're ignoring the very simple needs that we have. And so then the next question, what do I need right now? Sometimes that's very simple. I need to pee.
Yeah.
I need a nap.
Yeah.
And what's interesting about that, I think, is if we're willing to treat our inner selves as if we are really intelligent, curious toddlers. The inner
Mhm.
self will tell the truth, right? I mean, toddlers will tell the truth. This is how I
Mhm.
feel. This is what I need. They're not going to hide it.
Yeah.
And so often, if we're willing to ask that question, our inner self which in the Taoist or Buddhist tradition, even some of the Christian tradition, if you become like a little child or the beginner's mind. So that
Yeah.
actually brings us back into that simplicity of, oh, this is what I need right now.
Mhm.
The work you do with burnout. I think many of us who tend to be overachievers or we tend to be overgivers, um, we can be so far past the red line at times that even asking that question might bring up a lot of emotion. What do I need? I need a break.
Yeah.
No.
Well, I think, as a physician and, studying medicine, we learn to suppress those feelings. We learn to suppress what we need, and it becomes automatic.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
you
Mm.
know, you ignore the need to go to the bathroom, you ignore the need for thirst or water, or, when you're hungry, you suppress that because you have to keep working. And I think that that suppression leads to burnout,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and also the disconnect between the body and the mind.
Yeah, and isn't it interesting that our mind, the especially the left brain, likes to convince us that its activities are the most important. So the forecasting, the executive function, the decision,
Mhm.
linear goals, and things like that. And so that's such a small percentage of our overall psyches, though, in our experience that it and there I feel, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this because you've studied this and worked with it so long. But my sense is that because we live in a society that really overvalues left brain activities and we over reward that
Mhm.
by the time we reach middle age, we're kind of like a bodybuilder who has probably been told to only work out the muscles on the left side for 30 years, and then they wonder why they don't have much functional ability.
Exactly. Yeah, no, I think a lot of us are walking around kind of lopsided,
Hmm.
with the left brain being the one that's oversized, and we're not merging the two enough. There's not enough balance.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. The other day I did a drawing to represent that, the
Oh,
brain,
interesting.
sort of like a larger left side versus the right side. That
Okay.
I think that the arts are not valued as much. It's
Mhm,
always science and
mhm,
academics, and the arts,
mhm.
which I think are super important, tend to be not as valuable to folks.
And why, there's probably so many reasons. Why do you feel that that is? Like, why do you feel that we automatically place these other, money, the business and academics and what was the other thing you mentioned, sciences? Why do you think we place them on a higher pedestal?
I think it's we place a value on it because money, you know.
Right.
There
Yes.
there's too much negative press around being an artist and being a starving artist. For some
Hmm.
reason, people have bought into the belief that that's not important because you can't make money from it,
Yes,
which
yes,
is
yes, yes.
absolutely wrong.
Yeah.
We need art. We need artists everywhere in every realm, from the clothes that we wear to the advertising to everything that we envision,
Yes.
started as a drawing.
Truly, truly, yes. And yes, 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 yes. It all starts in our imagination, and then it moves
Mhm,
out into, I talk about in the Creative Cure, we talk about the creative formula. But actually, that just interestingly cues up the last question, which would be, the first one is how do I feel? Secondly, what do I need? And
mhm,
the third one is what would I love to create? And now, this can be either a long range, like a big vision, or it can be what would I love to create in this day? Often is when I'm going through difficulty, like challenge or something really hard. It's hard for me to think outside of or imagine outside of what do it's like too much struggle. So rather than try to imagine over the top of that something pleasant, I'll ask the question differently. I'll say, how would I love to feel right now?
mm,
It's often it'll be, oh, I'd love to feel confident. I'd love to feel at peace. I'd love to feel less anxious.
mhm,
And so that has the effect of, again, bring me down to this moment, not, being way out there in the future. Because I think a lot of times people we try to manifest or affirm our way over the top of really deep concerns or things that we're going through. So to me, by acknowledging what it is we're going through at the moment, if we're going through wonderful times, my experience is good times take care of themselves. So
Yeah,
it's not like we have to toil over why am I having a good time right now so much. But when we're going through difficulties, having a tool to bring us into the present moment. How do I feel? What do I need? How
yeah,
would I love to feel? That can be so, it can relieve the part of our mind that wants to run out ahead and fix everything when what we need to do is really be in the moment and tell the truth about this very moment, you know?
yeah. Yeah, you just said something really interesting to me. And it's kind of like how we disregard a lot of times, or at least I've seen this, in working
Mm,
with people. We disregard the happy times, the good times when things are going well. We kind of
mm,
we I don't know, we don't check in with
yeah,
ourselves.
yeah,
It's when things are going wrong that we tend to notice and dwell on those things. It's like the negativity bias, I think, with,
for sure.
that,
Well, and when you bring that up, I'd love to explore that a bit because I probably sounded a bit dismissive, like, oh, good times take care of themselves. But actually, even maybe by bringing more attention to this is a really good time and actually
yes,
basking in it, perhaps that's a more effective approach rather than saying, yeah, sure, I'll kind of basically go on autopilot when times are good. And then when times are difficult, then I tune in. What if we tuned in all the time and really appreciated this moment for what it was, you know?
that's exactly right. I mean, I think that's where gratitude comes in,
Hmm.
for my patients who are struggling with depression or chronic illness, for instance. I have to remind them to do gratitude journaling, to do a daily practice, and to also look at the highlights of their day. Like
Hmm.
what is one good thing that happened,
Yes.
today?
Yeah.
Um, because you can focus so much on the pain
Yeah.
and the
Yeah.
negativity. And again, it's that lopsidedness. We're focused so much on the negative that we disregard the positive when it does
Yeah.
happen. And those moments are magical
Hmm.
and they deserve to be remembered. And so I think the best way to remember them is in gratitude. So,
No, I love that. It actually reminds me of a practice I ran across recently. I was experiencing some burnout, just several years since we last talked, several years of really, really intense work and
mm,
exciting things happening, but also intense work. And I was feeling that insurmountable task experience, like even
yeah,
glancing at the schedule or glancing at the inbox just felt like completely too big, and then that begins those of us who tend to value ourselves based on how productive we are. That can tend to bring in feelings of fear or depression, like, oh, if I'm not actively doing a lot, then what value do I have? And
yeah,
I watched this little video. It talked about ADD, which is definitely a condition I work with in my life, and learning about it has been helpful.
yeah.
But he said in there, psychologist said, what happens is, of course, all of this, but what happens is we begin to receive messages that tell us we're under actual threat. And then we move out of our prefrontal cortex into our midbrain. So we're sending out signals that say we're stress hormones and we are experiencing the fight or flight, or maybe then move into freeze across that line where we don't feel like we can do anything about the situation. He said, what you got to do is celebrate a tiny, tiny action. He said, if you sit up in bed, pretend like you're celebrating your dog who learns how to go to the bathroom outside for the first time, like, oh my God, you did it. Yay. And he said,
Yeah.
do that. And then do something else very tiny. He's like, the key is it has to be so tiny.
Mm,
And he said, what happens is you actually create dopamine, and that in presence of dopamine in your brain tells your brain, wait a minute, we must not be in mortal peril, because that doesn't happen when we're in mortal peril. So then
right.
we begin to settle back down, and then we begin to have access of our prefrontal cortex and our decision of, our critical thinking again. And I tried that. is like, and it was just
Mm.
astonishing how it helped me get out of that stuckness for that day. And also, I'm saying that, and also counseling myself and anyone else who might be an overachiever.
Yeah,
Okay, good, but don't overuse that. Like if you need to rest, go get the rest. That's the
yeah,
restoration. You know.
yeah. I know. I was the type of person who always felt like if I didn't do something, if I wasn't actively doing something, that I felt guilty.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I would go on vacation and I would just get sick.
yeah. Oh, wow. Yeah.
Like that would be the time when my body just said enough.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so for the first 3 or 4 days, I would be exhausted. And and then maybe the last 2 or 3 days I'd enjoy my vacation.
Right.
That's not the case anymore, but that's how I was. Yeah, that's just go, 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 go,
I
go.
love hearing you say that you've shifted that. What have you done to make that not a recurring thing for you as much?
Well, I've certainly had wake up calls. One wake
Mm-hmm.
up call was my heart attack.
Yeah.
That was a real wake up call and a turning point for me.
Mm-hmm.
It took a while, and I still have to work on it. I have to work on just being okay with doing nothing or having lots of empty slots in my schedule. um,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's something that I work on every day. I have to because I do a lot of different things, and I have my hands in everything. It's the ADHD, whatever you want to call it.
Uh,
It's that personality where you got to just be in everything.
just stay spun out. I know. Wow. Well, and there's something that's so exciting for me, speaking for myself, there's something so exciting and kind of exhilarating when of keeping all these plates spinning until the moment comes when it's no longer exciting, exhilarating. Then it's just like, oh my God, it's turning into a disaster, you know?
Yeah, I have certainly been there.
Well, I can imagine people wondering, like, how does all this connected to creativity? And not that I care about the word creativity so much, like a single guitar string,
Yeah.
but I think part of the reason it's important is that what we're describing here, to me,
Hmm.
our creativity, our creative energy it's the synonymous with our life force, with the
Yeah.
spark, with our aliveness, you know. And so for me, taking care of that aliveness is the same thing as reconnecting. It's cultivating that connection, healing the connection with our creative inner self, you know, so that
Yeah.
we can stay alive inside of life. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I do think the creative mind works a little bit differently,
Mm,
in that um we like excitement, we like newness, we
mm-hmm,
like creating things. But I do realize that the creative mind has to rest,
mm-hmm,
you know, and that
mm-hmm,
rest is very important. And sometimes you have to walk away from your work. If you're doing a painting or a drawing or something, you have to
mm-hmm,
walk away from it. And when you come back to it, you
mm-hmm.
have a different perspective. And
Yeah.
I think we need to do that periodically in everything that we do.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and I would love you started the session out today with, you know, talking about inviting people into their creativity across the board, not just people who think of themselves as artists. And I would love
Yeah.
to, you know, I'd love to reinforce that. Um, because if more people can understand that um, often the expression of your creative self will come out in a form that is not necessarily commercial. Now, it certainly creativity can and should be used in our commercial ventures, but to the point you made earlier, I just feel it's so important if we can unhitch those two and go, what makes me feel truly alive? And understanding that if I spend 20 minutes a day or more, if I spend 20 minutes a day doing something that makes me feel really alive,
Hmm.
including for me today, sitting out on my back patio for a little while, after watering the basil plants and the tomato plants and the lavender on my
Hmm.
back porch.
Hmm.
Um, just participating with life in that way and feeling the early fall sunshine in my face, it reminded me of how connected I am to this beautiful, intelligent system in this world. You know, it reminded me I'm not this uniquely broken,
Yeah.
neurotic little particle that's flying around out there. And I think that by itself, I'm not going to get paid for watering my plants, but bringing a little more artfulness into that moment and
Oh,
participating with life in that way, to me, that's another example of a creative moment.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
I get the sense that you meditate
Mhm.
because I do feel like
Mm.
meditation changes you in a way and allows you to really appreciate things like
Yes.
the flowers, the trees, the birds, the sound of the birds, the
Yeah.
simple things,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
simple and beautiful things, the simple and beautiful moments in life. I think I have a greater appreciation through meditation.
Mhm.
Um, so
Mhm.
do you agree or
Oh my God. In fact, it's a bit convicting when you say that because yes, I do, and I did today. I did just before we started this session, but I
Mhm,
feel like I'm in need of some of refocus on that practice. Is giving it more space rather than just the minimum effective dose every day. Because what you just said reminded me of that William Blake line, from his poem Auguries of Innocence, to see the world in a grain of sand and heaven in a wildflower, hold infinity in the palm of your hand and eternity in an hour. That's the meditative mind that's able to look beyond the appearance of a wildflower or of the lavender in the back patio pot, and enter into a state of awareness that is so transcendent and powerful and healing.
mhm, mhm. Yeah,
Yeah.
beautiful, beautiful. So what do you do in your creative practice?
Well, some of it is that, it's
Yeah.
taking a walk by the river or whatever. But the other thing that I do, and oh, I love this because I think so many people can adapt this or adopt it in their own way. I started with our writing community. It's called a writing room. I started this thing called the 5 Minute Club. And one of the things that writers often, and most people doing creative ventures, whether it's writing or knitting or whatever it might be, often tend to procrastinate, especially if it's something that's we're creating, has to start with imagination, and then now we're dealing with our feelings of worth or self-worth and all that. So a lot of times procrastination is difficult, and I learned this from a writer named Jonathan Robinson, who had been a Buddhist monk for I think 10 years and then came back to the States and started writing. And I was putting together a class with him and said, you're so productive. Like you're prolific. You've written 14 books. You've been on Oprah a few times. I said, how do you do that? And he started laughing. He said, I'm really pretty lazy.
Oh,
Um, he said, I was a monk, so I learned to be very still and to
wow.
stare at the sky for hours. He said, I really love that. But he said, what I did is I made myself a promise that I would write for 5 minutes per day. Um, yeah. And he said, that's how I've written all of my books. And I laughed and said, well, 5 minutes a day doesn't sound like enough. He said, well, it's not. But he said, it's the minimum. And he's like, it's too small of a amount of time to talk myself out of. Because
Wow.
even when I'm really struggling or feeling completely out of ideas, I'll sit there and write for 5 minutes. And it might be all I can do to sit there for 5 minutes. But he said, more often than not, it sparks something. And the act of getting into it, I write for 10 or 20 minutes, or I write for an hour or two. He said, I've written for up to 10 hours because I started with the 5 minutes. And he said that's the way that I just kind of cracked the seal, and so we started this thing called the 5 Minute Club. I lead
Mhm.
it with our writing community. And I just want to just say that, your listeners, whatever it is that you love, but you often have a hard time making time for, start your own 5 Minute Club, and maybe just do it. Behavioral change experts would say, don't make it 7 days a week, make it five, because you give yourself a little bit of breathing room
Yeah,
around that. But yeah, like, I'm curious,
I
what,
love that.
yeah, what would you use that for in your world?
Well, I love drawing. I also
Mm.
love writing, but I try to draw every day.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so drawing for me is a meditative process.
Yeah.
And it also helps me to observe things more
Mm-hmm.
closely. And So for me, art is a practice that I would want to do 5 minutes a day.
I
Yeah.
love that. And I'm curious how it feels to make that kind of a promise to yourself. Like, does that feel easy, or how does it feel to you?
I think in the beginning it didn't feel so easy. Um,
Hmm.
and if I were to, I did this 30-day painting challenge where I had to
Oh,
paint something
hmm.
every single day for 30 days. And that was really hard because you have
Mm.
to pull out the paints and you got to get the water and the brushes and it's a whole
Right.
production. Drawing, I can easily do every day because all I need is a pen
Mhm, mhm,
and my
mhm,
sketchbook. And
mhm.
it's simple. I can do it on the subway, which I often do. I can
I
do
love
it
that.
wherever I am.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think the ease of the process
Hmm.
makes it less challenging for me.
Hmm.
When, I think, yeah, if it encompasses a whole lot of stuff, then it
Hmm.
gets harder. Gets
Yeah,
hard.
yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
That's really good counsel. I mean, of course, for writing projects, it's as easy as having English composition notebook, in my
Yeah.
backpack, or even using the notes app on the phone. But I love that what you said. It's um keep it so simple that it's hard to avoid. It's like I can't talk myself out of it because it's not like I have to go set up a big apparatus or something.
Exactly. I know. Well, have you read the book Atomic Habits?
No,
Well, that's
everyone around me
basically the
has.
book. Well, that's basically the
Yeah,
premise of the book is
yeah,
is instead of saying I've got to work out 30 minutes a day,
right.
make it 10 minutes a day.
Yes, exactly.
And you kind of psych yourself out that way, because you end up maybe you'll do it for 20 minutes. Maybe you
Hmm.
realize, yeah.
Hmm.
So
Wow.
I don't think you have to read the book because I think you're already doing it.
Well, in the Creative Cure, I talk about micro choices, which is
Yeah.
essentially the same thing. In fact, somebody who read my book asked me about Atomic Habits. So I have so many people around me who are huge fans of James Clear, and I'm on his email list because I love his stuff too. So,
Yeah.
but I'm curious as a physician. So I'd love to just think about this for a moment. So when if you can imagine someone saying, okay, well, I would like to pursue um, writing poetry, let's
Hmm.
just say.
That would be
But I don't.
me.
Okay, yeah, but I don't think that'll ever turn into money.
Yeah.
But I would like to do more of it. So maybe I'm willing to do the 5 minutes a day. How would you counsel them to frame that in a way that it feels more valuable because they're part of their mind is saying this isn't very valuable because it's not going to make me money. How
Hmm.
would you counsel with them to help them see it maybe a little differently?
Well, I think we have to start with the concept of what is valuable, right?
Mm-mm.
And attaching value only to money limits us.
There you go.
Money is an energy that, um,
Mm-hmm.
it's not necessarily something to that is going to validate us or money doesn't have the power to heal us, whereas for-
Yeah,
forming good habits does,
yeah, yeah. I love
nurturing
that.
our creative goals, that's healing.
Mhm,
And I think finding value in the creative process
mhm.
uh, rather than money. So I think we'd start with switching the perspective. This isn't going to
Yeah.
make me money, but it might lead to something else. Maybe
Mhm,
you will become a poet.
mhm.
I was given this book, this little notebook, and it says, "It has always been my desire to write poetry, but I find it incredibly effing difficult."
I love that.
I was, and so this is my little book, my little notebook that I write down all my poetic thoughts.
I I I I effing love that. Speaking of which, this book just showed up at my house.
Oh,
I
really?
pre-ordered it much earlier this year. It's by an account on Instagram and now Threads called Mary Oliver's Drunk Cousin. That's the
Oh,
name of her
nice.
account.
I love that. Let me see the cover again.
Oh, it's so
Oh, I
cool.
love that.
It's a
Okay.
bit
A
much, and it
bit
just came
much.
out. And
Okay.
Lindsay Rush, and she's really it's really doing super well. I think I saw today on Amazon it was like number 39 out of all books, which
Oh,
is
wow.
those of us who write books, that's a really high mark. So yeah, amazing. But I just love, and she's funny, so she
Is it
writes.
poems? All poems?
Yeah,
Poetry?
I thought I would read you
Oh,
one
I'd love it.
because they're so short. Uh like this one. And they're funny. So this one's called Make Like a Tree and Love. Scientists have a hunch that trees can become dear friends, linking roots to swap resources, bending branches back to share sunlight, shielding each other from the wind. Most of what I know about love boils down to this simple distinction: who stays and who leaves.
Hmm. That's kind of nice. I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sweet.
Well, it's such an interesting, I mean, she has some in here that are political, you know,
Yeah.
and and but heartfelt across the board, but also very, very funny. A lot of them. And you know, I love that as an example. The reason I brought it in right now, aside from being a delightful book, is a lot of people would assume that poetry would need to be this very, you know,
Yes.
traditional way or very heartfelt or very sincere. And it's like, well, she kind of mixes it all up in there and she's found a way that just really fits her personality and she feels alive doing it, which I love to see.
Yeah. I love that too. I mean, I did take a poetry course more recently. I think it was 2021.
Yeah.
And let's just put it this way. I wasn't encouraged. I wasn't encouraged.
Oh, yes.
So,
What does that mean? Did it feel like you, yeah, why?
because I didn't know some of the terminology used in
Mm,
poetry. I didn't
mhm.
know the poetic form.
Yeah.
So I was made to feel very ignorant. And
Yeah.
um, it was a little discouraging.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, and so I think that it kind of shut me down for a little bit. So,
Okay.
I mean, it's something to think about when
Yeah.
people are very intimidated by poetry, drawing, painting, the arts. And
Hmm.
we scare people away by thinking that you have to be really good at it. But it's a form of communication,
Yes.
and drawings is a form of communication. You can communicate with stick figures. You don't have to
Yeah.
be fantastic. And
So
I
well
think the
said.
same is true with poetry.
Hmm.
They're words that you put on a page. And why does it have to be in a certain form? Like, why do we have to restrict ourselves to,
Truly.
anyway, I
Well,
think that I'm going to write poetry someday,
well,
despite that.
I was thinking about I just read this book by Mary
Oh,
Oliver,
yeah, yeah.
Poetry Handbook,
Oh,
and this is I think her only book
okay.
about writing poetry. And
Yeah,
what I gained from this, Isla, was yeah, Mary Oliver, A Poetry Handbook. What I gained from this was, first of all, a tremendous appreciation for how much she knew about the total form of poetry. Like she has a classical education in poetry. I didn't realize that. Especially just reading her work, it all feels so free verse. But
yes.
reading this, and the other thing that really helped me was so I appreciated the fact that she brings a lot of that sensibility to her poetry.
Yeah,
But what helped me the most from this book was understanding better how she would go about taking a raw bit of free verse and actually edit it because I never could understand how one edits poetry. It just feels like it sort of comes out and then how would you change it much, you
yeah,
know? So this book actually gave me a better sense of how writing free verse there can be a certain discipline and depth to it, including the way it feels in our mouth when we're saying it, you know, or the specific word
yeah.
selection. So I found that really interesting. And it was a bit dry in places, when she's talking about the pentameters and feet
Yeah.
and all these things, but it didn't feel discouraging like your experience was.
Yeah.
To me, this felt more like, oh, I felt like I was learning about some of the roots of poetry in a way that I felt
Yeah.
grateful to hear.
Yeah. Well, I think Mary Oliver, some academics didn't feel like she was a great enough poet, right?
Sure.
Because the way she communicated was, I don't think it's necessarily simplistic. I think it was beautiful, but
Yeah.
she
Yeah.
used words that people clearly can understand so it would reach a wider audience.
Yes.
And I think that's what it should be. I love
Well,
James
yeah.
Baldwin for the same reason.
Oh my God,
The
yes.
the way he communicates,
Yeah.
it's beautiful in its simplicity.
Well, truly, and I was thinking of what you were saying about, we're using these words to communicate and stick figures. And I love just the last sentence of this book. In the conclusion, she says, poetry is a life-cherishing force, and it requires a vision, a faith, to use the old-fashioned term. Yes, indeed. For poems are not words after all, but fires for the cold,
Mm,
ropes let down to the lost. Something as necessary as bread in the pockets of the hungry. Yes, indeed.
mm,
That felt like it was basically saying in a different way what you just said also. It's like,
oh,
let's get back to why we're doing this.
yeah,
And it's not
yeah.
for some perfectionistic goal.
I know, I just got a chill when you read that.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Um, there's something about poetry that, um, it kind of, like, wraps around you in a
Hmm.
way.
Hmm.
It's, you don't even have to understand every bit of it. It's how it makes you feel, I think,
There you go. Precisely.
right?
Precisely.
Yeah.
And now we're kind of back to where we started today when you asked me to go through those questions. How does it make you feel? Like,
Yeah.
I think that our world, the other thing about where I'm going with this right now, and feel free to redirect any way we need to from here. I just love this conversation with you. But no, we're in a time on Earth that feels so intense to me, and I think most people who are highly sensitive are probably feeling somewhat steamrolled at the moment, just by the rate of change, by the pressures, by the things that feel looming above us in so many ways. But
Mhm.
I don't like to make these big distinctions between highly sensitive people and otherwise. I mean, I certainly identify that way. Um,
Yeah, I do
do
too.
you also?
Yeah, I do too. Mhm.
Yeah. I, I feel like everyone is more sensitive. Those who don't think they're very sensitive, I think we're all very sensitive underneath the surface. And
Mhm.
some of us are definitely, we seem to have more antenna up or something like that. But
Mhm.
I think everyone on this planet is dealing with a latent baseline of anxiety.
Yes.
And you and I know because of understanding of the way the brain waves and nervous systems work, and you much more than I. Um, we know though that when the set point is above, a certain level with anxiety, we're not making very good decisions. We're no longer our tunnel vision starts to develop. We're no longer even noticing or feeling our connection to each other.
Yeah.
And to me, that's the environment, the nervous system environment and the psychological environment in which violence is possible.
Yeah.
When I'm relaxed, when I'm feeling connected to you, even if we have differences, violence is not possible in that environment.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to do that. It's when
Right.
my anxiety is high that, and violence, whether it's physical or psychological or, using words, whatever it might be, the point is violence begets violence. And
Yeah.
so one of the reasons I feel so passionate about all of these things we're talking about today, Dr. Bates, is that to me, by returning to our bodies, by returning to our ventral vagal state, the green zone where we're more
Yeah.
relaxed and we're feeling connected and safe, by returning to that on purpose every day through some creative practice,
Mhm.
by using these tools we have to settle down and to
Yeah.
enjoy and appreciate simple things,
Mhm.
that means we're returning to a bit more health.
Yeah.
And, if we think of ourselves as individual cells in a collective body, if I can become a healthy cell in the collective body, that means I'm effortlessly spreading health to the other cells to which I'm connected. Effortlessly. That means I don't have to even start a campaign to change the world simply by being in my health.
Yeah.
I'm effortlessly connecting and exchanging health with others. And by the way, you probably, not probably, you definitely know more about this than I do. So I'm going to make a statement and feel free to correct it if it's not true scientifically. But my research says that a healthy cell has more power, has more potential energy, has more potential effectiveness than a diseased cell. Is that accurate, medically speaking?
No, no, no. It makes sense.
Okay, well, I'll say it's a hypothesis, but let's
Yeah.
just say people go, how is it going to be useful for me to, spend 5 minutes a day reconnecting with
Mhm.
myself, coming into my safety, coming into my joy? And I would just say, let's have this hypothesis say, well, it makes a difference because if you return to your health, if you return to your sense of
Yeah.
balance and wholeness, you're going to naturally help the world feel a little bit more balanced and whole, and you have more to give than you
Yeah.
would if you stayed kind of sick.
Yeah, I totally agree. There's also research to back up, the that 20 minutes of drawing will lower
Mm,
your cortisol levels, your
wow.
stress hormone.
Yeah.
Um, Herbert Benson,
Mm,
who was a cardiologist, talked about the relaxation response, which is
mhm,
really when the sympathetic nervous system, you know, kicks in the fight or flight.
mhm.
But the relaxation response is when the parasympathetic nervous system kicks in,
Right.
and one can relax, lower the stress level.
Mm,
I think that we need more of that in our lives,
yeah.
and oftentimes we don't allow that relaxation to happen. We're just going constantly. We're stressed constantly.
Right.
We're on social media constantly.
Yes.
And what we're looking at and what we're absorbing is also very stressful.
What was the cortisol? One thing I will say is anytime I sit with you for 20 minutes, my cortisol reduces. So I think you're a secret weapon in the world, a secret prescription. So yeah, everyone needs to sit with Dr. Bates for 20 minutes and your cortisol will go down.
Yeah,
Genuinely though, I feel much more relaxed spending time with you today. So thanks for that.
you're welcome. People tell me that I don't know, I have a way of calming them down.
I
So
think
I
so.
guess
Yeah,
I guess that's that's good.
it's a gift.
Yes, it is a gift. But it probably goes back to what you were saying, that if we all kind of take care of our inner selves, that
Mm,
we will be able to take care of each other, because
yes.
we're going to reflect some of that energy that we have. If we have this violent, angry, negative energy,
Hmm.
we're propelling that in the world to
Yeah.
other people.
Yeah.
And it's causing more fuel, it's adding fuel to the fire. But if we go into ourselves a little bit with more
Hmm.
meditation, we're more at peace,
Yeah.
maybe we can spread a little bit of love and
Yeah.
kindness,
Yeah.
that we are all human beings and we all want the same things.
That that right there, I feel like is so crucial. Just reminding ourselves that we're so much more alike than we are different. At its core, I think some version of a sense of safety
Yeah,
underneath everything is probably what we are craving the most, whether it's in our
yeah,
relationships or our housing or whatever it might be. We're just really looking for a underlying sense of
yeah,
safe. I'm okay.
yeah. Well, we're in very different worlds, right? I'm in New York City and you're in Idaho. So tell me, what's it like in Idaho? I mean, you've got beautiful landscapes, I'm sure, to
Yeah.
look at, and vistas that are stunning. But what's the energy like?
Well, I live in Boise, so kind of like Austin, Texas. It's a pretty diverse town inside of a state that's, known as a red state. So um having said that, there's a lot of conservative energy around. So, there's I would say not to make this a political speech, but I would just say it definitely has the sense here of quite a bit of uh, hubris when it comes to that. And so I'd say inside of this place, I'm often challenged to remember um, what we're talking about right now.
Hmm.
To remember because it's easy to go out and see, certain flags flying or whatever, and feel kind of attacked, to feel not very safe. And remembering, remembering. In fact, I go up to a little mountain town north of here. It's about an hour from here, and it's called Idaho City. And in the gold rush days, it was the largest city in all of the
Mm-hmm.
Northwest, including Seattle and Portland. It was larger than any of them.
Mm-hmm.
More gold came out of there than out of the Klondike in Alaska. So it's a kind of a very fascinating
Yeah.
old town, but now it's just tiny. And there's a bar up there, and I'll go sit there sometimes, and I'm surrounded then by people who are, literally carrying guns on their hips and knives and things.
Mm, interesting.
It's a mountain town, but as I sit there and talk with them, despite the appearances and maybe their bumper stickers, the fact is
Hmm.
we sit there and talk like humans, and we talk about the weather, and we talk about, how much
Yeah.
snow we're going to have this winter, and and I do that on purpose sometimes, just to remind myself of our shared humanity.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's so important. So
yeah.
important. Where did you grow up?
Well, here, so I was born in California. So back in '73, my parents brought me here. They were hippies,
Yeah.
and they had heard some myth of farms you could rent for $30 a month. So they're
Oh,
like, well, that sounds
wow.
affordable. So they came here. Turned out there wasn't any of that available, or not least not where we wanted to live. So I grew up, spent my childhood here in Boise, and then
Oh,
my
nice.
parents split when I was 12, and we moved to Seattle area. So I spent my teenage years in Seattle. Yeah,
Mm, mm-hmm.
yeah.
Nice. So tell me about your book that you're working on. You're working on a new book, I heard.
Oh yeah, thank you for asking. So I wrote this short book that I'm working with illustrators on right now, and it's a
Oh,
parable of a yeah, my very first kind of a
illustrate.
kind of
Wow.
a kid's book. It's probably more like Velveteen Rabbit in terms of like there's more than a dozen words or whatever on a page. So it's more of a story than a very simple
Picture book.
children's book.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's more kind of a parable,
Uh-huh.
but it's a parable of an acorn. And a
Oh.
wise old raven flies in from the great beyond place from which everything is born and drops this acorn. So it kind of has the tree of life, Yggdrasil, and tree of life sort of mythology in there. Um, it drops a seed. Yeah, it becomes this. At some point, it drops the acorn. The acorn starts to grow, and it begins to compare itself to the other trees in the forest and says, "Oh, I should be more like the straight pine tree, or I should become more like the elegant birch or the apple tree over there." Of course, wise old raven comes in occasionally and helps, acorn or seedling begin to understand things better. But seedling is feeling very badly about not being able to be like the other trees,
Mhm.
and then it also sustains a trauma. It gets hit by lightning, and so it's like, I'm broken. I'll never be worth anything. And then the little animal and insect helpers come around and have conversations with it. But eventually it gets the message, especially from wise old Raven, who comes back at the end and gets the message that, listen, the code of who you really are was present in the acorn you used to be. It's
Mhm.
still present in you now. And the only way you'll be happy and fulfilled in life is to quit trying to be the other trees and become only who you really are. And
Mhm.
that has become a book then that will be a larger, like a bigger book down the road, but it explores the themes of that, which are very simple. Discover, we got to find out who we are after
Yeah.
being, in the Creative Cure book, we talked about the three enemies of creativity, which would be socialization, which that's part of how we become a fully functioning human. We learn how to be human in these ways, but then,
Oh, you just froze.
right? Oh, I did?
Yeah, you just froze for a second. So,
Am I good now?
yeah, you're good now.
Okay. Uh, so yeah, we just go through this process of discovery, and so it's the three things: discover, and then self-discovery leads to self-acceptance. So discover, accept, and then from that place, now we're expressing. So
Mm,
discover, accept, express. So that's a book I'll be probably working on for a few years. That larger book. Yeah.
Mhm. Sounds beautiful. Yeah,
Thank you.
really great. Yeah. Would also make a good picture book too. You have like a children's version and
Yeah.
a middle school version.
Yeah, I really can't wait to see what it becomes, and
Yeah.
yeah, I'm using the 5 minute club process
Oh,
to
are you?
to
Wow.
stay to stay in it, because it's easy, like most of our things are. It's easy to get too busy for it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's just hard to have any kind of ritual or practice.
Mhm.
Um, one has to work very hard at that, for sure. Can you hear it? The traffic noise is very loud out there. Good. I'm glad you can't hear it. New York City noise. Yeah.
Yeah, your mic must be really good because I don't hear any of it.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, I have one of these bigger mics.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Um, yeah, it was so loud on the street. I just lost my train of thought. Um, anyway, yeah. So how did you come up with that book? I'm just curious, like what led you to
Hmm.
writing that? Because
Oh,
it's
interesting.
kind it sounds like a departure from your nonfiction, uh, The
Hmm.
Creative Cure, and this is more of a
Yeah, well, I think what happened was I was talking with a client one time. I was sitting with a person doing a guidance session, and that metaphor of the code in the acorn and just needing to return to that original self, that original code, and that we leave clues, and then that becoming so the very basic version of that story came out kind of spontaneously with a client one day, it really sunk in, and I used it later in a group workshop, and that went well, and people really understood it. Like, oh, I see. Yes, I have been trying to be all the other trees in the forest, or I've been diminishing my worth based on
yeah.
traumas I've gone through, and so I think that it's just stuck with me, and I've been grateful that it kept
Yeah.
developing.
Yeah, it's great. No, I mean, I think that so many of us try to be like someone else,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
when if we just were our authentic selves,
yeah.
we realize, and sometimes it takes a while, but
Mm.
that's the best place to be. That's
Yeah,
where you're going to find the most happiness.
wasn't it Miles Davis that said sometimes it takes forever to learn how to sound like yourself? That's
Yeah.
not a it's not a perfect quotation, but I think that's really close to what he said.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
So is that a raven behind you?
There's a raven behind me, and I have a raven on my arm here too. So
Oh,
clearly,
let's see. Let's see.
raven is a pretty big deal for
Oh,
me.
beautiful. Yeah, yeah. Beautiful.
Yeah,
Nice.
yeah.
And what does it represent, the raven?
Well, the raven has been my guy for a bunch of years. I had my first big spiritual kind of breakthrough back in 2007 that really opened me up, and Raven started showing up, so I studied it a bit. And
Mm,
Raven goes back, and as you can probably know in mythology, that there's the Raven. There's mythology about the Raven who helped to form the world. In fact, by flying from the great beyond place and dropping a seed that became the world tree. So Raven is big in Native American mythology and many other cultures. So yeah, there's something that calls to me about that. Raven's the keeper of mystery. Raven's a symbol of magic, real magic, things like that.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
I didn't know a lot about it, so
Mm,
thank you for that.
yeah.
Um, I'm just curious, are you doing any workshops coming up? Anything to look forward to?
Yeah, we're doing this it's called Writers Rising in LA
Oh, when?
at the end of October. Yeah, we're actually doing it in the Oscars ballroom. Um which is fun. So we have Anne Lamott, we have Cheryl Strayed, Marlon James will be there. Also,
Are you
oh my God,
kidding? That sounds amazing.
yeah, and this amazing writer,
What?
Cole Arthur Riley. Do you know her?
No.
She also wrote Black Liturgies. Amazing. So this book is This Here Flesh. So she's one of our
Wow.
speakers, and Dr. Kemi. Oh my God, I always mess up saying her last name, Nekvapil, is also going to be speaking virtually with us. Yeah, we just have such a beautiful roster this year, and I'll be speaking at that as well. And we also have a live stream version of that,
You
so
do? Yeah,
people
let
can
me
join
know.
from wherever for such an affordable rate. Yeah.
I'm gonna be in Seattle, well, I guess until the around the 20th, so
Mm.
maybe.
We would love to have you if you can make time for it.
Wow, that sounds amazing. Absolutely amazing.
Writersrising.com is where you can check it out.
Okay,
Yeah.
I will look at it. Anything else? I forget what the name of the conference you did in New Mexico, was it?
Yeah, that was
A long
this
time ago?
yeah, oh yeah, we used to do the gathering of the creatives
Yes,
there.
that's it.
Yeah.
That's where I first
Yeah.
met you, actually.
Okay.
Not in New Mexico, but when 2020 when we did it when you did it virtually.
Oh, that's right. Yes, and that
Yeah.
was just wrapping up. That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, okay. Yeah. Yeah, so then after that, then I left my work with Hierophant Publishing and Insight Events and went on my own. And so these are these are events I'm producing with my team at a
Nice.
writing room. Yeah.
Nice. Wonderful.
I'd
Well,
also love to I'd love to offer your listeners, maybe we did this before, but if they would like to use that journaling process, I have a free program. They can find
okay,
it.
great.
Yeah, no cost. And there's a little instructional video, and then there's an audio and a PDF version. And then I also have a little guided visualization at the end. So there's a whole bundle of things they can get, and they can find that at creativeselfjournal.com.
Okay.
Yeah, totally free.
creativeselfjournal.com.
Creativeselfjournal.com. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
And I always ask my guests what's their definition of creativity. So
Hmm.
let's hear your definition.
Whoa, I feel so strongly about this part that behind the word is this energy of aliveness. It's the spark that showed up along with us in our most original, innocent, pure, before we learned anything about the world, before we learned our own name, before we learned the rules, before we had any good or bad experiences. So for me, creativity, the definition of it is the very spark of aliveness. That is who we really are. It's our authentic self. And that's why it wants to be expressed. And
Mhm.
everyone here, everyone listening to this, you are a never to be repeated event. You never happened before in the history of the universe. You'll never happen again. So who you are and what you express from who you really are is truly precious. It'll never happen again.
Hmm. That's beautiful. Beautiful. Well, Jacob, thank you so much for speaking with me. It's been a thrill. I'd be happy to do it again anytime.
Likewise. And
It was so
I meant what
fun.
I said. I feel calmer and more centered just by being here with you. So thanks for sharing that space with me. I'm gonna go to the rest of my day and feel really grateful.
Oh, wonderful. Okay, well, thank you so much.
I'll talk
And
with you soon.
thanks everyone for listening.